Joining me today to talk about the Aussie firepower and is someone who has himself been part of that setup. He has been part of a World Cup winning squad. Yes, and of course, he's also the coach of one of the most successful franchises in the Indian Premier League, the Chennai Super Kings, is Michael Hussey. Michael, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here this evening.
No worries. Pleasure to be on the show. And yeah, it's good to catch up after a long time.
All right, the first question I have to ask you, we have to speak about Glenn Maxwell. Did you manage to, watch that knock? Everyone, of course, is talking about that being one of the best knocks in ODI World Cup history.
Well, I wish I could say I watched it, but I was trying to keep my eyes open for as long as I possibly could. I lasted until just after Josh Inglis got out. So Maxwell was just getting started. He must have been on about 15 or 20, and then that's the last thing I remember. So I was feeling a little bit despondent at that stage, fell asleep, and I woke up in the morning and I checked the scores and I thought, no, there must be some mistake. This couldn't have happened, and obviously watched the highlights, which is pretty much all of his innings. And what an incredible performance. Especially with him going through so much pain with the cramping and everything, the situation of the game, Australia in dire straits. It's got to go down as one of the greatest of all time. Whether it's the greatest, we could argue that probably for the next year. I think the only argument I'd put forward was that, say Ricky Ponting made a massive 100 in a World Cup final to help Australia win. Adam Gilchrist made 149 in a World Cup final. Yeah. Does that make the more special? I don't know, but I tell you what, it's got to be right up there with one of the greatest performances of all time.
You have been part of World Cup winning squad yourself. What is it about an Aussie side, Huss, that you really can never discount them? You can never, ever underestimate an Australian team in a World Cup. What is it about that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I think obviously you need to have a good squad to start with, and I think Australia has got another very good squad. So that sort of helps. And then I think one thing Australian teams have done well in the past has just built momentum as the tournament's gone along. It's tournament play. So quite often, and it showed in this campaign as well, Australia started slowly, losing the first two games quite badly, and people were starting to write them off. But they've just slowly built their form and got better and better as the tournament's gone on. Now, the game against Afghanistan was far from perfect. So Maxwell certainly pulled Australia out of a pretty deep hole there. So that certainly wasn't, the same sort of trajectory. Yeah. So I think they'll be looking for a really strong performance against Bangladesh leading into that semi-final against South Africa. But, generally Australian teams are very passionate about playing for Australia. Like most countries, prepare very well for every single game, are very competitive teams. We love to win. That's part of our sort of DNA. And then, just sort of always seem to have a great camaraderie around the group as well. Everyone seems to get on really well and are moving in the same direction. So I certainly see a lot of those traits in this current team as well.
You speak about camaraderie, Huss. How important is that for the Aussie setup, especially in such a tournament? We saw them always being in smiles, even when they didn't really start off that well.
I think it's important. Most definitely. They spend so much time together over the course of the whole year, but this is a special tournament. So, they'll come together, spend a lot of time together, get to know each other really well. But I think they'll understand that everyone's a bit different as well. And I think the good teams sort of embrace that sort of the differences in a team. There's not going to be the same personalities in any team. And, look at the Australian team. There's lots of different quirky personalities in there. But I get the feeling in the sense that they're embraced for who they are. And I think that's really important, particularly when you're away in a place like India for such a long period of time. It's got to be challenging. So you've got to try and stick together. And I'd say generally the Aussie sort of culture is to sort of really stick tight together. Even when things are getting tough, that's when we get tighter and tighter as a group. And, this team has certainly done that as well.
Going by the way they look so far in the tournament, we always have seen there's a bit of a gap between India and much of the rest, at least some of the best in this tournament so far. They really look like the strongest side has India. But do you reckon Australia is up there to contest for them as one of the contenders for the title?
Yeah, well, India have been incredible. They really have. The squad looks amazing. You talk about a team enjoying themselves. They look like they're absolutely loving it out there. And that was my big question coming into the tournament was, how are they going to handle that home crowd pressure? Playing, in front of their home crowd, they look like they're loving it. That they're just getting out there. They look confident. They're laughing. They're really enjoying each other's company, and I think that's pretty scary for the whole competition because the skills there, and they really are playing, a fantastic brand of cricket. Yeah. But again, another question pops its head up. Semi-final, it's a knockout game. Does that change them at all? I'm not willing to say it will because I think this Indian team, they're just loving how they're playing their cricket at the moment, and I don't think they'll even care if it's a knockout game or a pool game. I think they'll still go out there and play that same brand of cricket, but it still needs to be answered. And I think the other teams, whether it's New Zealand, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Australia, whether it's someone else, that they'll be trying to start well against India and just try and create a little bit of doubt, thinking, okay, there is more pressure now because it is a knockout match. That they're already qualified, they're through to finish on top, there's no pressure. Suddenly it comes to a semi-final or a final and you lose, or you have one bad day, or you're just off your best and the other team plays a little bit better and you're on your way home. So that's the question that I'm looking forward to seeing them answer. I think they can. They've got the quality to do it, but it still needs to be answered.
Yeah, and speaking of Australia there, what would you reckon have been the biggest strengths or the biggest reasons for them to have gotten so far and gotten at this position that they're in?
Well, I think the form of some of the top order players has been very good. Like obviously Warner's had a very good tournament. Travis Head, since coming back from injury, has done a pretty good job. Obviously getting that 100. Mitch Marsh has played well in the top three. Probably the middle order at times have just battled a little bit. Steve Smith has not really sort of found form yet, and I say yet. Marnus Labuschagne's done a decent job. But then I think the strength of the bowling, that they've done a good job as well, and some very good flat pitches. Obviously Adam Zampa has probably been the standout, but he's been very well supported by, the old warriors really, Cummins, Stark and Hazlewood. And then, they've got a bit of all-round power there as well, just to sort of chip in when needed. Mitch Marsh helping out with the ball. Stoinis can help out with the ball. Travis Head. So there's plenty of options there for Pat Cummins at his disposal. So it's a very well-rounded team. But, yeah, I think they all started a bit slow and a little bit flat, but they've just built their form nicely throughout the tournament.
You mentioned Pat Cummins there, Huss. Tell us a bit about his captaincy. What have you liked about him? Because it isn't easy managing skippers in the side as well. He's leading them, a couple of them. Tell us a bit about him temperamentally or tactically that you've liked.
Well, I think he's just a great character, and he would have been as disappointed as anyone at the start of the tournament when Australia lost those two matches. But I know he wouldn't have panicked. He would have remained calm. He would have definitely tapped into the experience of those other captains that you talked about. Certainly Steve Smith. He would have tapped into David Warner's experience as well. A lot, some of these guys have played a lot of cricket in India, and then he would have, really tried to galvanise the team and bring them together. And I thought it was very interesting listening to Glenn Maxwell talk after his epic innings. He said when Pat Cummins came out, he had a real calmness about him, and he just they had a little plan of how they were going to try and get through it, and I think that's important as well. So Pat is a very good character. He's calm, he's measured, he doesn't panic, he's not emotional, as in when things are going well, he's going to get too carried away, but if things aren't going so well, he doesn't get too low and down in the dumps either, and I think that's really important for any leader.
Yes, all of things really shaping well for that Australian side. You can never take them too lightly, again, reiterating that. Thank you so much, Mike Hussey, for joining us. It's always a pleasure speaking to you.
No worries. Thank you very much.
It's the dream of every cricketer, the ultimate glory. Few manage to keep their date with destiny. But for many, it's been heartbreaks and a cross to bear. The Holy Grail is here in India. I'm Rupa Ramani, and First Post brings you the ringside view. We bring you the Cup of Dreams, Cricket World Cup coverage like never before.